In this video, we're going to look at the costs of collective action. Politics is making decisions in groups, and typically the goal of the political process is to organize a group of people to do something, to try and take action to solve a problem. It could be going out for dinner with a group of friends, or it could be something more complicated, like a city or other municipality trying to figure out where to build roads, where to build schools, and what action to take with new developments. Or it could be something as simple as trying to coordinate a group project at school. All of those things involve the same principles, and that is everyone must abide by the group decision. Regardless of whether you agree with the decision, you've got to contribute and got to go along with it. That is a fundamental political problem with taking collective action. Now I'm going to use some examples to illustrate the costs that are associated with taking collective action. For example, let's say choosing a restaurant. We've got 7 individuals in our group, and they need to choose a restaurant. Now, there are costs associated with making that decision. For example, it might be costly to try and come to a conclusion. It might take a lot of time and effort. And then, of course, you could have the cost of going along with something that you don't want to do. Those are 2 types of costs that we need to consider. And there's names for those. For example, when it's time to decide on a restaurant, we could have 2 different actions. We could have one person decide, or we could have group input, sort of the democratic mode or the more authoritarian dynamic. Each one of those will incur some transaction costs. The costs of making a decision. How much time does it take? How much effort to get everybody involved, to solicit the input, and to come to a conclusion? When one person decides, that's a relatively easy thing to do. The transaction costs are low. Not much time, not much effort. One person decides, that's it. Everyone in the group has to do it. However, if you want to solicit group input, it might take more time and more effort to solicit everyone's opinion in trying to determine which restaurant you're going to go to. So that is increased transaction costs. And you can imagine, the larger the group, the more transaction costs would be associated with taking that group input. Now, another perspective is what's called conformity costs. This is the cost of going along with the decision. Essentially the cost of not getting what you want. Let's say in our group they deliberate, and at the end of that process it is determined that Burger King is the restaurant to go to. It is the restaurant favored by 5 out of the 7 people in the group. Burger King it is. Yet 2 people in the group really wanted Taco Bell. So for them, they incur a conformity cost, a cost of going along with a decision that they didn't agree with. And we measure that in terms of, we want to think about it in terms of the differential satisfaction. They would have been very happy going to Taco Bell, but they have to go to Burger King. In either case, they would have had to pay, right? We all have to contribute to the group, but then we have to go along with the group decision. So they're going to get a lot less enjoyment. So that difference, how much they would have enjoyed Taco Bell compared to how much they're going to enjoy Burger King, is the conformity cost. It's the benefit that people are missing out on by paying for something that they don't want. So that is another aspect of collective decision making. I'm going to give you a different example to try and illustrate both principles. Let's say I, as an instructor, need to hold a test. I've got 7 people in my class, and I need to assess them for the final evaluation. Got a couple different ways I can approach it. One, I can just pick a common time, date, and format. Everybody shows up, everybody writes the same test, and that's it. Or I could have a more differentiated approach, try and accommodate different people's preferences and say, you know what, we're going to have individualized assessments. You can write multiple choice, you can write an essay, you could do a project, you can do a presentation, whatever you want to do, whatever's going to work best for you. Each of those approaches would have transaction costs and conformity costs. So if we want to think about me as the instructor, the cost of me to create and mark up to 7 different types of tests, that would be very high transaction costs. The cost of me just doing one test at a common date and time, much lower transaction costs. So let's say I go with that option. I pick the lowest transaction cost. I'm going to have one test date for our final test, specific time at the school. That's it. No alternatives. That's going to incur a conformity cost. Conformity cost on the 7 different members of my group. They will incur a cost of travel time, traveling to campus. It might also incur a cost of having to pay for childcare. What about parking, gas? Maybe they have to take the bus. All of those things are costs that are now incurred on the group. So we can see the trade-off there. I'm reducing the transaction costs, but I'm increasing the conformity cost. So just to recap, at a very basic level, group decisions incur a cost. In fact, they incur two types: transaction costs, which are the costs of making a decision, and then the conformity cost, which is the cost of going along with a decision that you might not agree with. The costs will increase as the size of the group. The larger the group is, you'll have larger transaction costs, but you'll also have larger conformity costs as well.